This broadcast is inappropriate for all ages right here on #WeAreMovieClub. It's time for Bad Movie Club. Salutations, I am Camerai, and I am conversation ready. Today we're here to talk about stuff we've been watching, especially Tusk, because that's been the Bad Movie Club movie of the week. This is the Walrus movie, if you saw that, or if you even knew enough to say Walrus. Yes, I did, because I listened to the podcast. It was a crazy idea for a movie, and it turned out to be a pretty crazy movie, if you will. So, let's go and talk about the wonderful thing. It actually had some kind of hurtful, deep story built into it too, which is interesting because the real life story is that there really was a guy, and I think he actually was part of World War II. He was lost at sea or whatever, and he actually made friends with a walrus. And he then, after he got back to his life or whatever, he missed his walrus so much that he actually paid somebody for 2-hour shifts to wear a walrus costume and be his friend that he no longer had. So, woo! You know what I'm saying? If you know what I'm saying. Alright, go back. So, if we're going to go ahead and do this like this, I got to get used to tweeting out a little bit. About movie... Twitch.tv says camera. Ooh, I misspelled my own name. That's not good. Alright, Justin Long is in this. Justin Long is amazing. He's actually on the poster with the teeth. Justin Long is... Honestly, I feel like Justin Long about Justin Long like Kevin Smith used to feel about Ben Affleck. It's he can be the shark in Jaws. You can put him in anything. He was great in Zack and Miri Make a Porno. He was fantastic and accepted. A movie that I can literally watch back to back. I've watched it up to 4 times in a row. Don't know why I did that, but between him and Rory Maria Thayer and the rest of the cast, honestly. Because Jonah Hill's great, Blake Lively, even the villains. It's a crazy good movie. We gotta put that. I'm gonna put that on We Are Movie Club eventually. But so Justin Long is working as what looks like a radio show host, but it's actually a podcast host because that's modern day radio, right? So he goes all the way to Canada from California to meet a kid who they show a viral video that goes on, and this is what a meme is when something actually becomes popular. It's not just a picture that you write on. It's not a meme. You're not special for making a thing. I'm gonna try to gear back a little bit. I'm gonna throw across the room. You're adorable, but you're being a pain in the ass. Why are you fucking my mic? Huh? Okay, so what's happening is I'm gonna crush you to death. So it's he's playing around with a sword, a real sword, and he ends up damaging his leg to the point where he's got to cut it off. And apparently, they they're not nice on this podcast, let's say. They have some pretty controversial humor, let's say. They do name their podcast the Nazi Party, meaning they not see, not Nazi. Can you do it? Meow, meow. Okay, she's not very good at it. I'm gonna go back to crushing you to death with love. So he goes to Canada to interview the kid because the kid reached out to him. Apparently, like he turned down Oprah fucking Winfrey for me. But by the time Justin Long's character gets there, the Jedi sword guy has killed himself with his own sword, which is horrible and not funny at all. If I'm being honest, part of me is coughing, not actually laughing, but the rest of it is like this little weird defensive laugh I do. So forgive me if I'm laughing, because I actually don't find that part funny at all. But like, so he goes, and of course he hits a bar and he goes to take a leak, and where every drunk fantastic moment happens in the bathroom, he finds an advertisement for a roommate wanted or whatever in exchange for services rendered, because the guy's confined to a wheelchair, so he needs help, and apparently he can afford to pay all the rent himself. So Howard Howe, I think, is the name that they use. So he goes and he calls Howard Howe and he gets this appointment because he needs a story for his podcast. That's his living. He needs to replace this the sword kid with somebody else or with something, because he already spent all the money to drive up to Canada all the time. Like, you've got to do something with that. You can't just turn that into your vacation week. It's just the reality of it. So he drives all the way up to the Bifrost something. He ends up stopping in on the A to Z and meeting the Collins, and we see Harley Morrison as the international border guard thing, whatever that's called. So, and they have like so once Justin finally gets Wallace, that's the character's name, gets to Howard Howe's place, they have this really like long conversation about this and that, and like, which even includes like Justin Long's pee break, which was a weird addition. But like, he gets all excited about the tea, and the walrus dick on the shelf on the wall behind him. And he tells him the story of like befriending the walrus and everything. So like, there's that going on. And the wonderful actor that Justin Long is, he does this beautiful knockout flop to the ground from being roofied by the tea. And it's beautiful. Like, I could watch that shot for probably a good 30 seconds just back to back to back, because it's physical acting that you just don't normally see. Usually it's like supposed to be a goofy comedy, and this is for like dramatic purposes, and he nails it. And the fucked up part, I think, he's like in the middle of asking for more tea that's drug him because he just likes that much. He may have just been slipped heroin. I will come over there and neither one of you will like it. Are we clear? Okay, sorry to go off there, but so of course Justin Long's or Wallace wakes up in like a chair in this empty room, and Michael Parks' character is just polishing a walrus tooth. Later on, we realize that it's actually probably part of his leg, because sure enough, Justin Long or Wallace is missing a leg. Howard Howe has this very nice story about a brown recluse. And I cannot do justice to Michael Parks' voice because he has such a distinctive way of expressing and having power and weight in his words that, like, I don't think I'll ever have. But it is what it is. So, like, again, another kind of like long conversation about Dr. Bustier, and how like they had to like kill the spider, or ended up killing the spider. And they amputated his leg. They gave him a spinal block. What else did they do to him? Oh yeah, Howard ended up giving him morphine. And they gave him his big cup, which I like that from the beginning. Howard is animal training him. He's using a recognizable signal for sustenance or for drink at least, so that like every time Wallace sees Howard and that cup, it's like he gets thirsty. It's like, oh, he knows that that's where drink comes from. And it's like this weird comfort item too, like just almost a weird tease back to his humanity. And if you're not following what I'm talking about yet, by all means keep listening. But this is the Walrus movie, and I've already explained about his best friend, the Walrus. And then the craziest thing, not that like it matters, because like from the moment that he roofied him, and Wallace wakes up in that room in the chair, like Howard could just tell him whatever he wanted, and there's not a damn thing that Wallace can do about it. At dinner that night, Wallace isn't eating because he can't feel his arms. More long conversations. Kevin Smith does wonderful dialogue. Don't get me wrong. But I do wish there was more action in this movie. It drones on, if you will. So he actually starts to tell Wallace about his actual plans, that he plans on turning him into a walrus, that he has a walrus suit already that he thinks will fit Wallace. And like Wallace starts crying and screaming, and Howard's crying and screaming, and I think he even gets up and walks around at this point. So it's like, not only is Howard lying to Wallace, he is doing it on like a deep psychological torture level, and it's crazy pants. It's like true sociopathic nonsense. So I think there's been at least one flashback at this point, but I don't enjoy the flashbacks. I don't like that Pulp Fiction approach, where it's like you tell the story all out of order to get certain points made. Drip feed me information, fine. But like, let's not make a thing of it. So we know that they're having some kind of weird problems, that she wants to come with him, but he doesn't, we think that he doesn't want her to come with him, but he's blaming it on his friend. And then she has this whole momentous breakdown as well about the same things. But obviously someone else is there with her, so she's obviously cheating on him. And we find out later that he's cheating on her, but her connection's more of an emotional one, whereas he's just like, yeah, I can't get roadhead if she's there. I don't know why he's a goat. But, so at this point in the movie, it's very obvious that like she's doing his best friend while he's away. And she ends up calling him, and it's from the Hollywood Babylon podcast, the Al Pacino, ooh, more margaritas, more margaritas, that whole nonsense for a ringtone. So he ends up hearing his phone and going to get it. But of course, if he heard it, Howard probably heard it too. But he calls her back almost immediately, and she misses the call. And then Dick Wad, who's banging his girlfriend, ignores the call. So he has to leave them both voicemails explaining the situation, which ends in him getting hit upside the head with a walrus stick, probably, because who knows what he grabbed. There's obviously plenty of them around. Let's see. So yeah, in the morning, the girlfriend rallies the friend, and they actually go into action trying to save him. Which the timing of this is momentous, because had they answered the phone the previous night, this would have been a completely different story. But of course, because it is a story, it has to line up right and get the beats down. More margaritas. Ooh, ah. Okay, we've got to stop that. I'm officially not allowed to do that anymore. So back at the Bifrost, or Bifrost Manor, whatever the hell it is, Howard Howe is talking to him about his upbringing. Again, this is not like a light subject. It's not something to make fun of. But it does go on for a very long time again. And because we've already had such long conversations, granted they're powerful moving pieces, it's lacking a little bit of oomph to it. Now, still horrible things that he's talking about. But he's also a known liar, so we're not exactly sure how much he's just making up. Now, the difference is that when we pan out or zoom out or whatever, Wallace is obviously unconscious. So why would he lie to himself? He's just talking while he's removing the other leg, supposedly to get the other tusk down. Jeez. And then he's sewing up the arms too, I think, at this point. Like, he's sewing up, like, shoulder to elbow. And they get into it later, like, later on in the movie, but, like, basically a crucified T-Rex. So, something like this, I'm sure. And that's, I think, to get the flipper parts right. Because, again, he's turning him into a walrus. He's outright said it at that point. So they go and see Detective Frank Garman there in the Canadian police force for Manitoba. And the police aren't much help, I gotta be honest. He ends up referring them to a private eye who's been investigating legless bodies. And so they arrange a meet, and they meet down at, like, some fast food restaurant, apparently at the airport. Not sure why. De La Pointe has a thing for Gimli sliders, I think. I don't know how long I can keep up this accent if I talked about De La Pointe, because every time I say De La Pointe, I wanna like slather on a French accent. I want it to be De La Pointe, De La Pointe. Whereas he pronounces more like on you, or you can listen to De La Pointe. I can't do the voice. I can't do a De La Pointe voice. So, anyways, while Howard Howe is teaching Wallace how to swim as a walrus, which is punctuated by Wallace finding all the dead skeletons at the bottom of this water, which means that water's got to be fucking gross. Even if you pump in a bunch of chlorine, which is horrible on its own, the bones are picked clean. So either Howard removed the meat and tossed the bones in, which means that they would be all separated, but them to be how perfectly formed they are means that they went into the water, something ate the meat away, which means typically bacteria, which means it's septic, because bacteria poop, and then usually algae or whatever will eat the poop and turn into plant stuff. Anyways, it's gross water unless he drained it and replaced it, or he then maybe the chlorine killed enough of the bacteria. I don't know. it's maddening, like, to try to think of like saving that, and then the pH balance, and because it could like burn his skin. Yeah, granted he's amputated and tied and sewn up and put in a walrus suit, but why be uncomfortable? So De La Pointe is talking about how he met Howard Howe once, and see, I keep going very French Canadian, and it's not necessarily that drastic, because he does talk more like this, and this is not necessarily the voice of De La Pointe, but he does talk much more like De La Pointe. But he talks about Howard Howe and how he must have met him when he was under a different alias, when he was actually a police detective, when he was searching for this early on. And he obviously feels guilty about letting so many people die under his watch, to this serial killer. Especially when it's thought that, like, Canada doesn't have serial killers, which is why one would move up there and take over, because there's no competition, right? But of course, you got such a low populace per square foot that people notice when someone goes missing there. It's Rogers didn't make it over to the hockey, and he wasn't over at the Hortons, so we don't know where he's at. He's not hooking up with Mindy St. Clair, that's for sure. So anyways, yeah. So like the torture stuff with the walrus goes on a couple different ways, and it actually makes sense. Like he's feeding him raw fish, so that he looks like a walrus. He acts like a walrus. He speaks like a walrus because he really doesn't have a fucking choice. The way he's been mangled and whatnot. And mackerel's good. Even raw tastes, or raw. I don't know. Out of a can, it smells good, anyways. So I'm willing to bet that even if it smells a little fishy, even raw, it smells good. And so if you bite through those scales or whatnot, and as long as you're not choking on bones, you're probably having a pretty good meal for being a walrus. But back at the A to Z, the PI talks to the Colleen's, and they get enough information. They do the notepad rubbing thing to get the address for Bifrost Manor. And they head up there. And back at Bifrost Manor itself, Michael Parks is really hitting like his stride in like this fantasy domination aspect. He's having flashbacks of Mr. Tusk. We actually get to learn that he killed him. He got him while he was asleep. He killed him and started eating him like an hour or so before he got rescued. So like he's tormented with the guilt of killing his friend. And if you notice in the movie, the way it's very disturbing because the walrus is off on its side. It's obviously a very fake walrus, but I mean, you can make an argument that maybe he smashed his head in with a rock and rolled him over. But the part of him that's missing, and you see him like holding this thing, and I don't know what it is, but it looks like he ate him dick first. I'm sorry if that's crass, like, or crude. I'm not actually trying to be. I'm just being realistic. Down in that area, in between where his rear legs would be, there's a big bloody mess, and I don't think it's a sensor bar. So I don't. That was a really drastic decision on Kevin's part. I think it's like, yeah, he loved his friend so much that he started sucking and just kept eating. Like I don't get it. So out in the woods or whatever, the girlfriend and the friend, Haley Jones Osment, by the way, I don't think I ever mentioned that, finally find the rental car, and she's about to like dive into the lake, and Dale Point's like, no, he's not there, I promise you. So there happened to be close enough to the Bifrost Manor, which seems like a mistake on Howard Howard's part, that he would ditch the car so poorly, so close to his manor. But I guess with all the dead skeletons at the bottom of that little lake, he's feeling pretty cocky. Plus, a normal investigator he'd be able to talk his way out of it. There's not a lot of assuming stuff around for that to happen. But by the time they get there, and like they arm up too, like he's got guns for all three of them. But by the time they get there and they're actually after Wallace to try to rescue him, Parks is literally fighting Wallace dressed as a walrus as well. Now, granted, again, this is a power fantasy. He feels guilty. He feels like he's got to give Mr. Tusk a chance. But he's not willing to let himself die either. Because he knows how horrible humans are, and he knows that he can use, or he has that in his repertoire to use against something as pure as a walrus. Not my perspective. I'm trying to share the character's ideology. So sure enough, like once Wallace ends up actually gaining some advantage on him, maybe Parks is old in his walrus days. He stands up and rips himself out of the suit and it like has a machete ready to go, and Wallace stabs his tusk through the foot of the guy, which it's hard to believe no one else ever did that. But he starts stabbing him in the stomach with his tusks, and go Wallace. But the friend and girlfriend bust right in right after that. De La Pointe comes in, aims up the shotgun, probably with solid shot. So it actually would be a kill shot. And then it fades to black. It's kind of a dick move on Mr. Smith's part there, but it set up a dramatic tension moment. But as soon as we realize we're at an animal rescue, the tension's all gone. So actually, honestly, as soon as she gets out of the car with the wrapped up paper, if you're unfamiliar with like seaside venues and whatnot, newspaper is typically how they wrap fish to go. So as soon as you see the paper, you're like, oh, she's got a fish. They're going to see Wallace. They're at an animal rescue. They're walking around back. There's a igloo back there with a little pool and like this stupid ass cup everywhere. And then they go and see him. Wallace, I love you. She throws him a fish, and then she leaves to get porked by his chubby friend. And part of me wants that to be like a power fantasy of Kevin's, like enacted, but it's all in the background. He had to be really subtle about it because his wife would get mad at him. Now she probably can't beat him around the ears these days, even though I think his kid's still trying. But I doubt she would be happy with him. And I think for Kevin, like really all you got to do is like play with his waterworks a little bit, and it's gonna get him if he's not high. I don't know what happens when he's high. So like that's kind of like the end of the movie. Like I don't know what to say about this movie other than it is the Walrus movie. It really is based off parts of a true story that don't add up to the dramaticness of the movie itself. This is literally a joke that he made on a podcast that he turned into a movie, and it started the Canadian horror trilogy. So Yoga Hosers is what we're watching next week over on Rabbit/Camera. Rabbit/Camera. We're gonna have a good time. It's a much funnier movie than this one. There is a small horror aspect to it, but it's much more of a teen comedy. It stars the Colleens from the A to Z, Johnny Depp and Kevin Smith's daughters, and it's fun. They actually do a good job. It's got like a Clerks 2 vibe to it with a modern day teen spin to it. So like it's very much about their phones being their lives and just having their noses in their screens, that sort of mess. Yeah, just give me one Canadian who wants to come up and be like, you've got such a horrible accent, you make Canada cry, and it's gonna be Tears for the Great White North, we'll be red, white, and blue for you. That was a fun bit though with Harley and the Canadian flag. It's like, oh, you Americans think you're top shit, and you see the maypole leaf and its colors, and you see red, white, and you think blue, but Canadians are always red and white, but never blue. Something like depression was something invented by America. I don't know. It's fucking funny. Really well written line. And Harley does come back, if you like that big bearded bastard, in Yoga Hosers. So until you see us next time, have a nice day from us here at #WeAreMovieClub. This has been Bad Movie Club. If you want to see anything else we're up to, go ahead and click the annotations and they'll take you to our other channels. Thanks for watching.